Hello, I'm Gavin Lee, and I'm the artistic director of 60 Hour Shakespeare. And today we are joined by Annie Hammond and Nettie Chickering and Olaya Ciccarelli-Bermudez for our acting Shakespeare Roundtable. Annie, can you tell us something about yourself?
Hi, I'm Annie. I'm a Yorkshire actress. So I live in the middle of nowhere. Currently, there's like 100 cows opposite my house. I don't know if that's a relevant fact to say about myself. And yeah, I do a lot of work in Yorkshire and in London.
And Nettie,
So I am Nettie Chickering. I am based in Brooklyn, New York. I am originally from New Hampshire, where my family has a herd of 22 alpacas. It's not cows, but same idea.
Same theme.
we're leaning into this thing. And Olaya,
Hi, I'm Olaya. I'm an actress from America, and I'm currently studying acting at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. I love tap dancing.
all right, we are going to start with an easy one. Good luck, everyone. And it is your first day of acting Shakespeare school. What are you going to teach the actors? And I will throw it to Nettie.
First day of acting Shakespeare, I would say to start simple, throwing up the ends of lines, so making everything end with an exclamation point. I think as in everyday life, we usually tend to slope down at the end of things, kind of wrap things up with a bow. I would say putting energy into what you're doing, having a point of view and having fun and upward inflection.
Annie?
Yeah, I feel like maybe just having fun. I think a lot of the time people are like, oh, I don't like Shakespeare, or it's really like intellectual or elitist, or I mean, I once saw a load of 5-year-olds do Midsummer Night's Dream, and I don't think anyone even understood what they were saying, but it was like one of the best productions I've seen. So I think if you're enjoying like the text and the story, which is kind of how it's meant to be performed, I think you can't really go wrong.
Olaya?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think starting off with games and things like that is a really great and accessible way to get into Shakespeare. I know I love like doing an exercise where you like create Shakespearean insults, and I think that can get people into the language really easily and get people really excited about it. I always think that's a great way to start.
Next up is what was your first time acting Shakespeare? Free for all. Anyone?
Was in middle school, so I was, I believe, 12 or 13 years old, and I did 12th Night playing Mariah, and I just had so much fun. It was really fun to be kind of like the puppet master. I just loved every second of it, and it helped that it was comedy too. I think it was really joyful way to get into it with the comedy.
I, funnily enough, also did Twelfth Night as my first Shakespeare production. I was in my second year of high school, American high school, so I was about 15 years old. I played Viola. It was so much fun. We'd studied Shakespeare earlier when I was a bit younger, just reading the plays, but I'm a firm believer that Shakespeare just has to be performed and seen. I think it's a whole completely different experience that's so magical. And so I had an amazing time doing 12th Night.
Think mine was Juliet at drama school, which feels quite late. But yeah, I mean, I read things in high school, but at that point, it's just like the boring text you've got to read for your exam. So I think it was Juliet, I'm not sure. But that was really cool to do a production of Shakespeare for the first time with like costumes and dancing, and I think there was a musical number. So different to like reading it in English class.
So, is there a difference between acting and acting Shakespeare? And if there is, what is that for you?
I mean, I think it's hard. I think to separate them kind of makes there be a divide between them, which can kind of make acting for Shakespeare seem a lot more daunting than it actually is. I think it's just about getting into the language and understanding what you're saying and bringing as much truth to the role as you can. And of course, a lot of Shakespeare is really over the top and crazy, but I think bringing that like very truthful element into it is what makes it come across so well. I don't think it would work if you didn't have the core acting elements to it.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of the way I approach both is the same way. I mean, basically just learn your lines is the basis of what I do. And I think that's the truth, like no matter what you're doing. But I think there's a difference sometimes in the way that you might access a text. So I think for Shakespeare, you might do a lot more like research up the front of it, like looking at words, and there's like an extra little bridge than say if you're, I don't know, barista two in like some film, because that's like you can draw so much more easily from your life, and I think you can for Shakespeare as well. It just maybe takes a few more sort of tools to get there. But then that's my favorite part of it, is looking at a massive Shakespeare play and being like, how do I kind of bring this to myself?
I agree. There's a lot of crossover, I think, from more modern text and Shakespeare. I find that a lot of the tools that I've learned when it comes to Shakespeare, so things like source material or paying attention to punctuation, all of that can be used in a modern play, and that actually can help me and think about things that I wouldn't normally think about with a modern play. I think there is more specificity when it comes to Shakespeare research. Things like looking up words that you might think you know already. There's a lot more of that than for modern, but that's just because it's the language that we're using today. But sometimes that can be the case of Shakespeare as well when you're doing a more modern take.
So Annie and Nettie, you both mentioned tools that you might use when you're acting Shakespeare, and Nettie, you specifically called out punctuation. To what extent does the punctuation matter when you're acting Shakespeare?
I think it's another way of him writing, being his own dramaturg and writing stage directions into the lines. I think, a lot of the time it feeds what you are putting into the speech. And, you don't have to act in between the lines because it's all there on the page for you. So it's really just a roadmap for you to follow. And I usually try and follow it as much as possible.
I guess I think I would try and do that at the start. So I guess for me, it's like another tool, like a way in. But then if I had like a choice that I thought was really fun, or if another actor's doing something in a scene and I don't want to do that, then I probably wouldn't stick so much to it. I guess for me, it's like really helpful at the start, but then obviously if I want to let it go in performance, then I kind of often do that. But then I guess at the same time, when I have stuck to the punctuation, it is generally better. So I do think he knew what he was doing when he wrote his speeches. But yeah, particularly in terms of like the energy of those speeches, those long monologues.
Is it the punctuation, especially of the first folio, that's made a difference when you've been looking at a script, or what's the deal been?
I mean, I guess because what I know about it in terms of like the way that it's changed between different like publications and stuff is that it's always changed, right? And then there's also the theory that the the punctuation we have now isn't even what Shakespeare wrote down originally. So I suppose for me that's kind of license to go fuck it in terms of a lot of like the speeches and stuff. Like there's semicolons and stuff in there, and I remember reading something that he wouldn't have even used a semicolon. So when I get to them, I'm like, eh.
What do you make of it, Olaya?
Yeah, I think I think there's a lot of freedom in Shakespeare because I think yeah, between different versions there's different punctuation, so I think that's a really fun way for an actor to get into it, and I think no actor can perform a role the same, but even the changes in punctuation can help you make a character your own, um, and really take the stage.
All right, straight up, what's the best note you've ever been given by a director when acting Shakespeare? Asking for a friend.
I really don't want to say have fun with it because I feel like that's the most annoying note, but probably that has been the most useful. It's hard to think of a specific note. Um,
I mean, I think always just like going big, like taking risks, because I think you can find the best things if you just go absolutely mad. Because you can always reel things back in. It's so much harder to go big than it is to go small. And with Shakespeare, especially, the language is so beautiful and so grand itself. And you really need to step up to the plate and match its energy. So I think that's a note I've gotten, to just not be afraid of pushing past the barriers.
Any revelations for you, Nettie?
Well, one is to know the text so well that you can just do anything with it, to throw it away, to try doing it ways that you wouldn't think of doing it. So, talking as like a 12-year-old, as your 12-year-old self, doing it, as a petulant child, doing it as, talking to your mom, putting yourself in all these scenarios. And then some of the things might seem like they don't work or are crazy, but you've tried it. And some of those crazy things you can then put into it, and give it some color and texture. So that was like a really big help and kind of revelation of just doing something you absolutely wouldn't think of doing. And another would probably just along the same lines of having fun with it. Really, just at the end of the day, trying not to like anticipate. We know a lot of these stories, or you might have like heard them a lot of times. Just trying to be present in the moment by moment, and really putting yourself in the situation, which can be, a lot easier said than done, but just really trying to be truthful to what's happening.
Yeah, I so agree with that. I remembered a very specific note while you were talking, which was play Juliet like she's not going to die, which but generally for all Shakespeare plays, just playing it like you don't know the end. It's so true. Or like play it like it's a comedy. I can't remember what they said, but yeah, just sort of living it for the first time and just not holding on to all of the other productions that you've ever seen of that play, because most people have seen everything a million times. Yeah, just making it kind of yours, which will make it new.
So, level with me. What's the best Shakespeare production or performance that you have ever seen?
Okay. This is gonna sound so strange, but the best Shakespeare performance I've ever seen was a Shakespeare performance that wasn't even in English. My best friend is from Lithuania, and I got the chance to go with her there for one summer for a week or so. And the day we arrived, they were doing their last performance of Hamlet in this theater in Kaunas, which is the town in Lithuania where all her family is from, and we went to the production. And I think there's something about Shakespeare that's so universal, that's so beautiful, as well as the language, of course. And I just remember this moment. They had this proscenium stage, and then there was kind of a little runway jutting out. And on either side of the runway, there was no audience. It was just like a dark pit. And for the scene where Hamlet sees his father's ghost, he ran along the runway, and then a sheet of water came pouring down like over the proscenium arch, so only the runway was like covered to the audience, and they projected the spirit of Hamlet's father onto the water, and that was just the most magical thing I've ever seen. I will never forget that. It was incredible. It was so beautiful. It was a beautiful production, and you understood everything that was happening, even not knowing exactly what people were saying, just because the acting was so incredible. You could understand. You would be like, of course, and you would get the emotions, and it was amazing.
Nettie?
It's really hard to pick one. Okay. I will pick one. I would have to say Taming of the Shrew, which normally I wouldn't say, but this was a Shakespeare in the Park all female presenting cast. This was maybe, I want to say 2017, 2018. And it was starring Janet McTeer as Petruchio and Cush Jumbo as Bianca. And it was just this all-star cast. The world that they put it in was a beauty pageant type of style. So it was all very tongue-in-cheek. The final speech, which typically will, give me a very strong adverse reaction. Spoiler alert, for this production, it was like she had said all of the right things to crown her the ultimate winner of this beauty competition that they were having throughout the show. So it kind of tied it back from this opening number of, establishing the world of we're in this pageant, we're competing. There was like a talent portion, there were musical numbers. It was all just kind of crazy, but it was so much fun. And Janet McTeer is an actress who I just adore. And it was just so well done and well thought out, and it made me completely change my mind about the play and anything that I had gone into it. It was like I adore these women. So that was really cool. Also, honorable mention to John Douglas Thompson in Merchant of Venice. Another favorite actor.
Annie Hammond.
I'm trying to think of a good one. I think probably I don't know if you guys saw at the Bridge, Midsummer Night's Dream. I think it was streamed as well. Yeah, it was really good. I went to see that on, I think it was the actual first night, like previews. Just the way that it's staged, because I think this is correct anyway. It has like a sort of central raised stage, and then kind of almost like a cross structure. So like 4 more stages raised, and then the audience was sort of below but in the staging. So it really felt like the audience was kind of in the whole play, and then it was sort of actors above you and below you, and then swinging on wires and going through the audience. And so it was a great way that they sort of involved the audience without it being kind of hammy or like cheap or like superficial involvement. Like, I'll say a line to you and then ignore you for the rest of the play. And you're like, eh? But yeah, it was just, the staging was incredible. And I think that's the only production of Midsummer's Night's Dream where the mechanicals I've actually found funny. Like, they were so funny. And I didn't even understand some of the jokes, but I was like, these people. But yeah, they were so good. It was just such a funny, like, joyous production. It's very, very, very good.
So one of the things that academics sometimes talk about when it comes to Shakespeare is strategic opacity. The idea that Shakespeare took away all of the clear character motivations from the original sources that he ripped off. Does that help you as an actor, or does that get in your way when you're acting Shakespeare?
I think it's a big help when you have all these kind of open-ended questions that you have to answer for yourself. You know, it gives you this kind of agency to say, okay, how do I feel about this? What is going to help me with my my drive and my tactics of getting what I want? And what do I think about this world? Instead of someone telling me how I should feel about this and how I should think about it, these kind of open-ended questions, it allows you to have your own, you know, insert your own like moral compass here and for this situation and that one. So it definitely helps.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like you see like Ophelia done, for example, in a million different ways by such incredible actresses, and it'd be a shame if we didn't have that if Shakespeare had written, like, you know, she specifically wants this thing, or um, I think that's part of the reason why Shakespeare is so good, is because you just see endless reproductions of plays and characters in so many different ways depending on who's acting it.
Yeah, no two production can be the same. So you can see even the same play over and over again, and it's still completely new every time, which is what makes it so exciting. I think it really helps as an actor because I think it allows you to connect with your characters more and have more fun and more imagination in developing motivations and backstories and getting into the mind of the character.
When you're acting Shakespeare and you're physicalizing your objective, what has helped you to do that? Has it been Meisner, or has it been something like a displacement tactic, a Cicely Berry sort of approach, or putting all of your attention on an activity in Meisner? What is it that really helps you to go after your objective when you're acting Shakespeare?
I think one of the best exercises I was ever given was by a tutor at Arts Ed, and he talked about placing the world around yourself. So when you go through all of your lines, like in rehearsals and when you're learning your lines, um, about making sure everything has a place in the world, like geographically. Um, so, you know, a character or an object or a person. And I think a lot of that is about constructing the world of the play kind of visually and mentally, and then just carrying it with you all the time. Um, and that's something that helps me, because I feel like the more immersed I am in the character and the text, the more just naturally my objective kind of comes and is always sort of, you know, in everything I'm doing and saying. But it also just helps you like get out of your head and be outside of yourself and be sort of big, because you're sort of expanding your field of sensitivity or whatever, without, you know, forcing it or thinking about that instead of thinking about your objective. So I think that's the most useful sort of exercise I have for that.
I did study at a very, very specific Meisner school, the neighborhood playhouse. So it's 100% Meisner, which I think helped a lot with grounding myself with an activity. Definitely helps with having a routine, but also, again, having the ability to drop that routine and not have it drop what you're doing or the intentions that you're playing. I think also a big help for me was Peter Brook, an empty space. So kind of still staying grounded, but having the ability to ground yourself in the space in which you're playing, ground yourself in your body, connecting your body to the space. So this kind of push and pull inside, but also being grounded on the outside and again in the world that you're playing. Definitely.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. I'm losing my voice at the moment, so that is why I sound like this. Um, I think whenever I go through a script, I really like to action it and use. I think it's just such a helpful way of I don't know, getting into your body and trusting your instincts, but also not always relying on your first thought for an idea. And it's always about doing a sort of action verb to the other characters or a specific other character in the scene, or if you're doing a soliloquy to the audience, and it kind of pushes the focus off of yourself, which I find really helpful. And it's all about trying to do something to someone else, which I find really useful. And I think some of the best verbs I've found that have helped me get into characters have been physical verbs, like doing a line and imagining that you're poking someone or punching someone or slapping them, or these are all very violent actions, I realize, but it really produces a very specific physical reaction and way of saying the line, which I think is incredibly useful and helpful for me.
What's surprised you about acting Shakespeare?
I think how accessible it often is, I think for me. I don't know, there's so many characters and plays that just seem really sort of modern, for lack of a better word. I don't know, like Rosalind and As You Like It is one that's very feels like she's almost in a modern rom-com or something, and you don't have to read the monologues like a million times to get a sense of what she wants. Midsummer Night's Dream is another one. I guess that's why we like it so much. But I always thought in secondary school that it would be such a slog to do Shakespeare, and it would be so difficult, and I'd have so many like hours in my room trying to get to grips with the lines. But actually, I think a lot of it is just it comes a lot easier than you think it does.
Absolutely agree. It's just so innately human, just so universal. And yes, I think initially when I got into it, I thought this would be something fun to do. You know, I'm a 12-year-old after school program, you know, fun thing to do. And I still love it, every second of it, everything I do with it. I think just because it speaks so true to who we are as humans and the human condition. And it's like there's always there's always a quote you can draw from, or you'll be, you know, in a rehearsal doing a play and you hear a line and it speaks to the, you know, the conflict you're having, or the question that you're asking, you know, to the universe and is going on, or this any problem that you have. It feels like it can be, you know, soothed a little bit because somebody has said something, you know, hundreds of years ago that is touching to you. So it's always exciting.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. I think it's just, yeah, it's just so easy to connect to, I think. And I love as well, which I didn't expect, and I think that's something I've even discovered this year, but how collaborative it is, and how much of a community you can form with the other actors and other people involved in the production. I think a lot of more contemporary plays are usually have quite small casts, which is also an amazing experience to do. But I think there's something so special about the grand scale of Shakespeare and having so many people around you and getting to work with so many different people. And even if it's just like a small little scene, all of the characters interact with one another at certain points, and it produces like such a feeling of a small world, a small universe that comes to life. It's not just a little pocket, it's just this whole world that you get to escape into.
So, talking of worlds and where it all began, have any of you ever used any original theatre practices, any cue scripts or anything like that?
I don't think I have. I think that would be such a fun thing to try. What an adventure. But I have never done any of that before.
Nettie?
A couple workshops with a couple different companies, and I think they were just longer scenes. I want to say The Tempest, and I want to say I can't remember the other one, but that was definitely memorable because you had to be so present and just so you had to listen so hard. And even if you had a line maybe at the top and then like 20 lines to go past and you're waiting, you're thinking you're going to be next, or you're thinking, okay, maybe in a few lines this is where my line is coming, and it didn't happen. It was just like you had to constantly remain present and listening, and it was a wonderful exercise in just being fully present and prepared because you just didn't know when it was going to come. So it was pretty exciting.
What about you, Annie?
I haven't. I studied original theatre practices for a bit in terms of theory, but it was largely like looking at pictures of actors on stage and then what the scholars had surmised that meant they were doing. So there was one picture of a guy sort of doing a funny walk with his like legs stretched out, and then they decided that meant there was such thing called a stage walk, where whenever you were on stage you had to get like really low to the ground and make as large strides as possible. So stuff like that, which, I'd love to try it. I don't know how that would come across for a whole hour and a half on stage, but yeah.
Wild. This next one is off the chain. What is your dream part in acting Shakespeare?
I feel like mine's constantly changing, but as of as of today, I love the double casting of Cordelia and the Fool and King Lear. I think being able to do the duality of daughter and two people close to the king, seeing these parallels, seeing that the daughter, Cordelia, might be wishing that she could be a fool, and vice versa. The fool could wish that they could be closer and a family. I think there's so much duality in the two roles that are, I believe, typically typecast, not always double cast, not always. But I would love to take on that. I'm sure a huge thing to do, but I really love the idea of two people, one person playing the two roles.
I think mine is potentially either Romeo and Juliet. I'd love to do that. So sort of dynamic and honestly just stage combat. But currently, I mean, it does keep changing as well, Nettie. But I think currently it's maybe Rosalind in As You Like It. I just think she's probably one of the best written female parts in Shakespeare, but also ever. Um, and especially nowadays, there's definitely a sort of a dearth of those. So yeah, I think Rosalind is a really incredible role, and very sort of, for Shakespeare's time, I think, kind of almost gender neutral in how sort of versatile and how much she does and says, and how much is sort of in her roles. So I think probably at the moment is Rosalind. But
I think, ooh, there's so many good roles out there. I think right now, at the moment, it would be Iago in Othello. I just think what a fascinating role and character he is. There's so much manipulation. He's so charming and kind, uh, as as a facade, and then underneath it, he's just this horrible, horrible, jealous, angry, twisted soul. And I think getting to explore that would be so interesting and so much fun.
We riffed a little bit before on the text and the way into Shakespeare and the difference that makes to you. When you act Shakespeare, what has been the biggest thing for you? Is it the meter stress, or is it the sense stress, or is it the sort of syncopation between the two of them that you can't really make that call?
I mean, I think for me, I try not to think about it. I think the most important thing in a performance for me is the other actor and what they're doing. Um, and that can be so massively different scene to scene. I think that I kind of make sure all my attention is on that. Um, I guess beyond that, for me, probably the meter stress, just um, because that can also be quite unconscious. So, and it's sort of a helpful thing to fall back on if you do find that you're getting a bit lost in a speech or a scene.
Mm.
But yeah, I think I try and sort of not think too much about it when I'm actually doing the performances.
What about for you, Olaya?
I think part of what's so great about the verse in Shakespeare is how instinctive it can be. I mean, it's kind of this heartbeat rhythm, so it's just innately a part of us. It comes to us so easily, speaking it, just because it flows the way we naturally speak. So I find that, quite often I don't have to really pay attention to it. It just kind of comes naturally in the way it's written, because it's just written so marvelously. And I find that, yeah, quite helpful as a guide to just keep me centered.
Nettie?
I think it does blur a little bit. I think there's, I definitely had the natural rhythm going, and then I think there's something to be said about knowing the rules so well and knowing the rhythm so well that you can break it. And when it is broken, leaning into when it's broken, with a trochee or with something that goes outside of the rhythm, or with what we call here feminine ending. So, places where it's just overflowing with emotions, and that can kind of guide you into a whole nother rhythm, and then you have to get back into the rhythm and find, there's this kind of dance, I think, of, when things are really, really on rhythm and what that means, and then when they fall by the wayside and what that means, and how you get back. So I think it's this kind of roller coaster of and just kind of riding the wave of it.
I think they're really useful for making choices in rehearsals as well and stuff. Like, as you say, the kind of spilling over rhythms, you can kind of use actioning or something there and be like, okay, what's she doing? Is she pretending to forget her words? Is she full of emotion, and whatever she's trying to do, she's going to fail at in this moment? I think that's such a useful sort of tool for making choices.
Is there a difference between acting in one of Shakespeare's comedies and acting in one of his tragedies?
I would say it really depends on the director and the vision for the production, because I think uh, there are a lot of comedies that can be played quite straight and quite naturalistic in a way and quite similar to tragedies. I know, for example, Measure for Measure is always, I don't know, technically classified as a comedy, but it has some very, very dark themes in it. And I think it's usually like best suited to playing that dramatically. I think the the power and the message of the play comes across much, much better than if it's, I don't know, just played for laughs. Um, but then again, you can have insanely wild comedic productions of Shakespeare that are so far from naturalistic and are very stylized and heightened and madcap, which can be quite different from tragedies.
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of being respectful to the tone and to the intent of you as an ensemble. Um, I mean, if your intent is to like create an emotional catharsis or to give the audience a really enjoyable experience, I think as an individual actor, you don't want to like go too far away from that, so that I don't know, you're making them, you're kind of disrupting the tone right before your fellow actors are going to come on and do like a death scene or something like that. Um, but then on the other hand, I think if you're in a tragedy, you don't necessarily want to play the tragedy. If you're in a comedy, you don't want to play the comedy. You always just want to be, you know, if you're Juliet, you think you're going to fall in love and you're going to live, and you're in a rom-com. And if you're um, King Lear at the start, you think that you're just having a nice time and you're going to, you know, give your lands to your daughters that love you. So what's that, like a nice family kitchen sink drama? But I think as long as you're kind of playing the truth of what you're doing, the rest will kind of take care of itself. Um, but yeah, so I feel like it's pretty similar depending on, you know, what the director specifically wants you to do for that specific thing.
Okay, but first you'll have to unlock your device.
My phone wants to join in.
Uh-oh. Nettie?
Difference. I think there is. I think it's interesting. I definitely agree with what was said. I mean, I've seen Measure, for example, in just like completely ridiculous way where it was almost like inaudible. It was so quick. It was fast paced. It was comedy, like for like most of the time. And then there was this moment of Isabella and Claudio, her brother, you know, when they met, it just like slowed down and everything was very serious and very, so I think there's so much that you can play with, as far as tone, you know, with speed and adding things that are not necessarily what you would assume tragedy would be. I think there are so many moments of comedy in a lot of the tragedies, that when you do really lean into those moments and kind of not highlight them, but give them their chance to be comedy within a tragedy, that when you have that comedy, then the tragedy pays off just as much. You need both in order to appreciate the other. So I think that's something that was obviously very clever when he did that, because there's more of a payoff when you have the other. You can't appreciate one without the other.
Yeah, there was that saying which is like it's easier to cry if you can laugh first or something. Or I can't remember what it is. But yeah, so agree.
Curveball now. Name a character or a play with which Shakespeare dropped the ball. how it should have ended?
I think Ophelia should have got more scenes. I mean, she's such an interesting character, and she's so like witty, and she's got so many jokes, and she has like 3 scenes, then she dies. And there's so much time with her just giving people flowers. I wanted her to like talk to other characters more. Yeah, I think Ophelia could have got a bit more stage time.
Yeah, Ophelia all the way. Nettie?
Um, wow. I want to say Taming of the Shrew, but I just defended it, so I'm not going to go there. In instances, there are exceptions. But yeah, Measure for Measure is very um, can be very off-putting just with the way, especially with the ending of him just kind of like assuming that Isabel is going to marry him. Like it's very like, and we'll go and you know, this assumed marriage, which I get, you know, that's how they, I guess, categorize it as a comedy because there's an impending wedding, nice little bow in the future, but there's a lot of there's a lot of things that kind of make me just cringe a little bit when I read them. Just this kind of assumption of marriage, assumption that everything's okay after all this craziness. Um,
Yeah.
Also, letting her. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, continue.
This is perfect. This is perfect. This is exactly what I want to say. Me interrupting you, letting her speak. Isabella doesn't speak for like 2 pages at the end, and it's just kind of like you're muting these characters at these like very like at the height moment, you know, at this peak moment. So I'm sorry, I let you say.
Oh, no worries. I was just gonna jump on your train because I was about to bring up Measure for Measure. Not to make this all about Measure for Measure. My school just did the production this year, so that's why it's on my mind. But yeah, I think just the treatment of Isabella is such a baffling one in the play. She gets kind of blackmailed by this corrupt leader, who tells her that her brother will basically be murdered unless she sleeps with him. But the whole thing is she wants to be a nun. And then this duke comes and kind of saves things, and makes it so she doesn't have to compromise her values. And then at the end, instead of letting her become a nun, he decides to marry her, effectively doing the same thing as the corrupt leader who he tried to stop. So it's just a complicated production overall, I would say. There's yeah, it's quite a time.
Last question, so make it matter. What's the most ridiculous or serendipitous thing that's ever happened to you in a Shakespeare production?
Ooh. Well, this didn't happen to me, but I will throw it out there. I was just in a sort of mashup production of Romeo and Juliet and A Midsummer Night's Dream in January, and one of my castmates, they were playing Puck and Friar Lawrence, and we were in our dress rehearsal, uh, and it was the first scene that they had as the friar, and they dislocated their knee on stage. I didn't know what was happening. I was playing Titania, so I was technically asleep for basically half the play. Um, I got to lounge about on stage. It was very nice. And they pushed through the entire first act, and then they told our director and crew what had happened. And so luckily they were made to sit out for the rest of the second act. But then they continued. They did all of the performances after that. They kind of iced their leg took some Advil and went back on, and it was, I mean, quite incredible. Like, I don't know how they did it. They were fantastic, but it was quite a crazy story.
Piggyback off of that, this didn't happen to me, but I was an usher for Shakespeare in the Park the summer they did Troilus and Cressida, and the brilliant actor named David Harbour, I don't know if you're familiar with him, was playing Achilles, and he tore his Achilles tendon while playing Achilles during the huge fight scene towards the end. He finished it, he hobbled off the stage with he had like a prop gun that he was like using as a crutch. It was the most intense and brilliant thing I've ever seen in my life. But he unfortunately couldn't continue after that, obviously. But it was so intense, and Achilles touring the Achilles tendon it was wild.
I also don't have one that happened to me, but it is also an injury, so maybe it counts. It was like a friend of a friend, like a story told to us when we first started like doing combat, being like, be careful. I think he was like doing a fight with rapiers, and his family was in the front row. So instead of dying, turned to face his opponent, he turned to the side to die and got stabbed through the side because he didn't tell anyone. And the audience just thought it was a great death, but obviously he had to go to A&E. So that's probably the wildest story I've heard.
Right, our work here is done. Thanks, Annie. Thanks, Nettie, and thanks, Olaya. You have been watching 60 Hour Shakespeare.
Hello, I'm Annie Hammond, and you're watching 60 Hour Shakespeare.
Hello, my name is Nettie Chickering, and you're watching 60 Hour Shakespeare.
Hello, my name is Olaya Ciccarelli-Bermudez, and you are watching 60 Hour Shakespeare.